4, 3, 2, 1.
Well, hello, you scrub lords. You know, I was not supposed to be making any quality content for another few days. However, I couldn't pass up this opportunity to do a Devblog chat on one of the most anticipated videos in the past, well, few months, to be honest. Did I say videos? I meant vehicles. The M163 VADS, it's finally coming. Bert is coming to town for War Thunder. And yes, for those of you who are already typing in the comments in chat, I know that is a 30mm Gatling gun test, but it's Bert. You can't replace Bert, okay? I mean, it's Bert. No other way to describe it. But to be serious, we're going to be going through the short history of the M163 VADS today, and what you can expect, or what at least I think we can expect from War Thunder. So let's get right into this thing. So I'm reading off of tanksencyclopedia.com. By the way, they are a fantastic source, so I highly recommend go checking their website out. I'll leave a link in the video description here. So they have a short little tidbit of information here on the M163 SPA-AG. The SPA-AG version, self-propelled anti-aircraft gun armed with a 20mm M61 Vulcan autocannon and a turret installed on a M168 mount on a M741 carrier. The Vulcan air defense system had rapid-fire capabilities and is very accurate up to 2 miles in range. Like all SPA-AGs, it could also be used against land targets with deadly efficiency. Now, the M163 VADS is mounted on an M113 armored personnel carrier, which is a very, very prolific armored personnel carrier in service. When I was all that great at carrying troops, not so much, but I'll get into that in a moment. However, it was a very, very cheap and very, very simple design, which allowed the U.S. to export it widely to multiple nations. I mean, a lot of people use this, like Jordanians, Lebanese, NATO used it. The list goes on for people who use this thing. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find a Western nation or a nation supported by the U.S. and NATO that didn't have M113s. They were just that decent machines. Now, one other thing about the M113 that's also particularly characteristic of the vehicle is that it's amphibious. So, now I'm not sure if the M163 VADS is going to be amphibious. They mentioned that in the Devblog chats here somewhere. However, the vehicle itself, I can't see this thing being... If it is amphibious, then it's going to be hard-pressed to do anything effectively, I would think, but that's just me. Now, I did mention earlier that it wasn't a particularly great carrier of personnel, and that stems from the experiences of troops in Vietnam. Now, one of the things they found out that was about this vehicle when the troops were running inside it was that, well, yeah, it was an armored personnel carrier, but it was really only armored against, well, heavy machine guns, to be honest. And on top of that, the interior roof was so low that if this thing even hit this so much as a small rock, the troops would bounce around inside and they'd slam their heads up against the roof of the vehicle. So you'll oftentimes see footage of Vietnam era troops riding on top of the vehicles outside of it. So, well, at that point it's just like, well, why are we spending so much money on this M113 armored personnel carrier that nobody's actually riding inside to get the protection for? So, I mean, this is a particularly good photo right there, or footage right there, where troops are just riding on the top. I mean, look at that. It's just, they're not inside the vehicle where they should be. Now, that was in its APC role. It fulfilled a multitude of roles, from artillery tractor to APC to, by the way, those guys are probably jumping out of the vehicles like, let's get the hell out of here, Joe, like, fuck this thing. As I was saying, it fulfilled a multitude of roles, and one of those roles happened to be anti-aircraft, and that brings us on to the M163 VADS system. So, this self-propelled anti-aircraft gun was put into service in 1969, so just inside the cutoff date for War Thunder. For those of you who don't know, the cutoff date is December 31st, 1969. Any vehicles on that were introduced into service on that date or before that can be put into War Thunder in terms of ground forces. That's different for Air Forces, but I'm not sure the exact date on Air Forces. So that means anything from 1970 onwards, you're not going to get. And people are just like, oh, they're just going to keep pushing it back. I doubt that, to be honest, because that would be way outside the scope of the game. In any case, so the M163 VADS was built in response to the requirement that the U.S. Army needed the ability to have very effective point defense anti-aircraft capabilities. These would be put in tandem with a vehicle known as the Chaparral. The Chaparral was sort of like an artillery tractor that had been modified with a specialized turret on the rear to carry 4 Sidewinder missiles, or some sort of anti-aircraft missile. I think they're Sidewinders, though. I could be wrong about that. Please correct me in the comments section if I'm not. And the idea was that the anti-aircraft missile systems would hit aircraft flying at higher altitude, whereas the M163 systems, with the Vulcan 20mm Gatling guns, would be engaging low-flying air targets. And also they would provide point defense against incoming ground units. They were used especially effectively during the Vietnam War, where they were exceedingly effective at escorting convoys. I mean, let's face it, jungle, no matter how thick, is not going to stop 20mm Vulcan gun firing 3,000 rounds a minute into the jungle, and I think there's also versions that fire even higher. Now, for those of you who have heard the term Vulcan before on just of aircraft, yeah, it's the same gun that the U.S. started putting on their fighter jets. The F-15, the F-16, the F-18, the F-14, they all had 20mm Vulcan systems, and they still do. That is the weapon of choice that is the gun of choice of most aircraft today, at least in U.S. service. So, where is this thing being placed in War Thunder? In War Thunder, the SPAAG M163 VADS system is going to be placed at Tier 5 for the US SPAA line. Currently, the Tier 5 SPAA is the M42 Duster, which actually has a 6.7 battle rating, and really all it is just a slightly more maneuverable M19. It's not a particularly great vehicle for shooting down aircraft. Yes, it has 40mm anti-aircraft guns, which can do a lot of damage, but the problem is that in-game currently we don't have flak shells, and that is what really makes the 40mm anti-aircraft systems. And since we do not have that capability, well, it's kind of hit or miss with that thing. You need to generally put multiple rounds on target, and you need to hit the aircraft directly, whereas with flak shells, you don't necessarily need to hit the aircraft directly, you just need to land the shell in the vicinity to damage the enemy aircraft. Now, one of the most prolific problems that Tier 5 is facing right now at Tier 5 is that, other than the Falcon, there really isn't an anti-aircraft system that all the nations have that are effective at taking down jet aircraft. Generally, the jet aircraft will just outrun the turret rotation speeds of most of these systems, and on top of that, they're generally high-caliber single-shot systems. The classic example of this is the ZSU-57-2. While the ZSU-57 may have great elevation speed and some decent horizontal traverse, it only has 57mm cannons, which are really only effective at shooting down helicopters, not so much a jet fighter flying close to Mach 1. So, not just the U.S., but the U.S., the Germans, and the Russians all need new anti-aircraft systems for Tier 5 to combat the jet meta, or the jet bombers, especially at that tier. Like vehicles like the Arado 234, the IL-28, and also aircraft like the B-57B and the Canberra. However, those are all going to get their own separate videos, especially the SPAAs that are coming in the next patch, so we'll wait until then before I discuss them further. So here I'm going to wrap up the M163 VADS video here by going over what I think of the vehicle personally. I think this is sorely needed. I'm glad that the US is finally getting something that is capable of engaging jet fighters on a level that they haven't been able to in the past. The American SPA line is not bad in general. There's a few turds amongst the mist. Cough, cough, M15, I'm looking at you. However, the SPA line for the Americans is generally pretty good. It's really only once you get to 6.7 and up where the American SPA vehicles like the M42 Duster just don't have the firepower and the rate of fire to successfully engage jet aircraft, especially low-flying jet aircraft. They're perfectly capable in engaging prop-engine fighters and prop-engined bombers. Dornier 217s, for example, they're perfectly capable of shooting those down without much difficulty. However, vehicles like the Vulcan will basically sweep the skies clear of enemy aircraft, and it's going to make flying those jet bombers and those jet fighters into ground forces AOs a lot more dangerous in the coming future, especially when they're going up against the Americans, because they're going to have arguably one of the best anti-aircraft systems in the game. In any case, this has been many miles away. I hope you guys have enjoyed listening. Stay tuned to the Devblog on War Thunder's website. You're going to have to search for it. Either that or I'll put a link in the video description, which I'll probably just do anyways. And I will see you guys in the next video. Have a good one, guys.